All right, let's get into it. You ever just look at a person, or maybe even the company you work for, and wonder, why are they so stuck in the past? Why do these old, outdated ideas stick around long after we know they're wrong? Well, today we're going to unpack the actual architecture of getting stuck. Because it's not just a bad habit. It's a system, and it's a powerful one. And it all starts with something as simple and honestly as familiar as this. I bet a lot of you grew up hearing this rule, right? It's this fossilized piece of advice from the days of, actual iceboxes. It's the perfect little example of a freeze, a belief that just gets locked in time, even when the whole world and all the technology in it has completely moved on. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll define what this unseen freeze really is. Then we'll look at the anatomy of being stuck, how it scales up. After that, we'll dive into the architecture that holds it all together and explore the weird role intelligence plays in all this. It's a real trap. And finally, we'll ask, what on earth does it take for a thought? Okay, let's start at the beginning with the core idea here, the unseen freeze. This is all about how the past doesn't just, influence our present. It literally becomes it. The term for this is cognitive stasis, and I think this definition just nails it. It's like a clock just stops ticking for one specific topic. And from that moment on, it doesn't matter what new information comes along, because for that one issue, reason has been locked in a basement somewhere, and you're just stuck in time. And here's the really crucial part. This isn't passive. It's not just about being a little outdated. It's an active process. We actually build up defenses around these frozen beliefs, and that whole defensive system just replicates itself, spreading from our own little habits to our family rules and right on into the boardroom. So how does that happen? How does it scale? Well, that brings us to what the source calls the fractal freeze. And just like a fractal, it's the same pattern repeating over and over, getting bigger and bigger, scaling up from one person's bad idea to the unshakable policy of a huge institution. And this is the journey it takes. It starts with one person. Some bad event happens, a project goes completely off the rails. That becomes the initial anchor, a simple mental shortcut to avoid that pain ever again. Then, that rule gets passed around the team, and it becomes tribal folklore. You know the vibe. We don't do things that way around here. And finally, the institution makes it official, codifies it into a rigid process, this professionalized inertia. And by then, nobody even remembers why the rule was made in the first place. And that little rule becomes what the author calls a living ghost. So cool, right? It just haunts the organization, spooking everyone away from new ideas, all because of some failure that happened maybe decades ago in a totally different world. So what is it that holds this ghost in place? What's the machinery? This is the architecture itself, these twin concepts that show this incredible parallel between our own psychology and the way big organizations behave. It's fascinating. First up, we have persistence. For you and me, we call it belief perseverance. That stubborn thing where you just refuse to change your mind because the first impression was so strong. Well, for an organization, it's called path dependency. The company is literally a prisoner of its own history. Its past choices dictate its future ones. See, it's the exact same idea, just on a different scale. Then you've got data filtering. We all know confirmation bias, right? We hunt for the evidence that proves we were right all along. Well, organizations do the same thing, but it's called institutional blindness. The way the reports are structured, the metrics they track, the things they talk about in meetings, the whole system is designed in a way that it literally cannot see new or challenging information. It's filtered out before it ever reaches the top. And finally, there's the fear response. As people, we are wired for loss aversion. The pain of losing $20 feels way, way worse than the joy of finding $20. In a company, that same impulse is called risk mitigation. The policies aren't there to create big new wins. They're designed to avoid ever repeating that one ghost failure from the past. And that just strangles innovation. Now you're probably thinking, okay, the solution is just to be smarter, right? More rational. But that's where we get this incredible counterintuitive twist, the intelligence trap. Which forces us to ask this very simple question. Are smart people actually more open-minded? You'd think so, wouldn't you? But the reality is often the complete opposite. Because see, for a lot of very smart people, being wrong feels like a personal attack, an existential threat. So their intelligence stops being this amazing tool for discovery. Instead, it becomes a bodyguard of the mind. It's a highly sophisticated security system with one job: protect the ego and shoot down any evidence that threatens that frozen belief. And this bodyguard is clever. It has all these tactics. There's surgical dismissal.
Finding one tiny insignificant flaw in an argument just to throw the whole thing out. There's the wait-and-see stall, arguing that things are just too complex to act right now, which is just an excuse to do nothing forever. Semantic reframing, where you just twist words and change definitions so your old idea still looks right. And my favorite, intellectual sunk knowledge, the idea that, hey, I've spent 20 years building this worldview, there's no way I can be wrong now. The point is, these aren't just tricks, they are defensive weapons, and seeing them, especially in ourselves, is how you start to disarm them.
The source gives us this amazing metaphor for this: a gravitational sink. Now don't worry about the math here, just get the picture. That initial frozen belief, it's like a massive star, and its gravity is so powerful that any new idea, any new piece of evidence, just gets sucked into its orbit and crushed. It literally can't escape the pull. So if we're all vulnerable to this, and if being smarter can actually make it worse, how does anyone ever change their mind? How does a freeze get broken? That brings us to our last section, the conditions for a thaw. First, we have to understand why it's so incredibly hard. This whole architecture we've been talking about, it's a defense mechanism. It's built for safety. So when you come along with new, better data, it doesn't feel like you're helping. To the person you're talking to, it feels like an attack on their safety, on their very identity. So with that in mind, there are really only two ways out. The first path is, well, an external catastrophe. We're talking bankruptcy, a game-changing new technology, a massive new law, something from the outside that is so huge it makes the old way of doing things literally impossible. The ground beneath the old system just crumbles. You're forced to change.
The second path, this one's a lot harder, and it's all internal. It's called identity decoupling. This is the conscious choice to separate your sense of self-worth from the need to be right about something. And when you can actually do that, the bodyguard of the mind has no ego left to protect. It can finally stand down, and you can look at new information for what it is.
And this really is the key takeaway. When you run into this kind of deep-seated resistance, you have to realize you're not just arguing against a bad opinion. You are pushing against a complex, structural, multi-layered defense system. And recognizing that is the only way you can even begin to find the right tools to start a thaw. And so that leaves us with one last question to really chew on. Now that you have this model, take a look around. Where in your life or in your job can you now see the hidden architecture of a freeze at work, just keeping things stuck?